is the reason that I'm stating this is we support missionaries. And it's not so that we can provide food and water and all that stuff. That is what we do, but the purpose of that is to share and show the love of a God and the salvation of a Savior to these people. Because this world, it's going to end. That life that little Ronnie's living is going to ultimately come to an end, but if he knows Jesus, um, if the people that discarded him would come to know Jesus, um, it's all going to be okay one day. And so we do support missionaries, and we want to continue to maybe even expand that some. But what I'm leading up to is we also have a young lady in our presence who went to Africa, and she spent some time over there, and she is going to share her experience with us today. So, RieAnn, if you want to come down here, you want to go
I'll
ahead?
come down here. This
Oh,
works.
you got the mic. Okay.
Yeah. Where do you think it was? Good morning, everybody. So Scott mentioned this morning how you need to watch what you say in a pastor's home because you can have a sermon used it against you. So I'm going to pick on Grant for a minute. You finally happy that it's happening? I wouldn't tell him when I was speaking. He told me the second I got back from Africa, he's like, "Rie, you got to speak on this." And I said, "Maybe, we'll see." And then when I finally talked to Scott about it and told Grant, I'm like, "I'm doing it." He's like, "When?" And I didn't say a word. So I am a part of PFW's MedLife chapter. So MedLife is a nonprofit organization on a huge global range. They focus, you could probably see it on the back of my shirt, but since you can't, they focus on empowering what they consider undeserved or like underprivileged communities, specifically in Latin America and Africa. And they do this by providing equitable short-term and long-term access to medicine, education, and a whole bunch of other stuff. They say if you go to medlife.org, the first thing you'll see is their MedLife difference, which says, "Our mission is to build a worldwide movement empowering the poor in their fight for equal access to healthcare, education, and a safe home. To achieve our mission, we take a different approach to social justice work." They listen, they collaborate, they prioritize sustainability, and they always follow up. So what they do through this is they empower students and volunteers to help become advocates for people in these communities. They do this by having these chapters in all these different colleges across the US, across Canada, all these different places. They do SLTs, which is what I went on, service learning trips. And then they also have their own fundraiser called Moving Mountains to help provide money for all these different communities. They hire and train local staff for everything. The actual national headquarters, they go into these countries, they find locals who can communicate with people and say, "Hey, this is who we are, this is what we want to do. Are you willing to help us?" And so they hire these people to be the team leaders in these communities. And it is up to these team leaders to, number one, communicate with the national headquarters and say, "This community has desperate need of a mobile clinic," or "this school needs some sort of something." And it is up to MedLife to help work with these people to provide these people what they need. So they not only train people to be part of the headquarters, but they also hire and train doctors and nurses for these mobile clinics that they do. So they usually do this process over the course of a couple months. And then once they know that this outreach that they have created is sustainable and actually will keep going, that's when they send students in. So This was our whole group that went with us. The first few people you see up here on the right, that is Alejandro and Rosalie. They are the two people from national headquarters who come on different MedLife trips because they work with promotional stuff. They take pictures of us students, they take videos, they do all this different stuff so that they can share it worldwide and say, this is what our students are providing for these people, please help support us. These other two people on the left, the far left is the team leader. Her name is Nima. She was the one who helped coordinate everything and who was like our main translator. And the other woman sitting next to her is one of the nurses that they hired. Her name is Stella. And then all of us kids in the back, there were about 20 of us who went on this trip. There were 7 of us from PFW, and the rest all came from Loyola University in Chicago. So SLTs, again, I said stand for service learning trips. We technically are volunteers as far as like the actual work. We cannot actually provide much actual like health care to these people because we don't have actual medical experience. But we go there for a week and we participate in all these different activities. We have reality tours, we have project days, we have mobile clinics, we do all this different kinds of stuff. I'll get to that in a minute, but I believe my next picture is actually getting to experience more of like the tourism part. So one of the things that MedLife incorporates for us students are these excursions. So the excursion I went on was to the village of Mataruni. We were staying in Moshi, a town in Moshi, but Mataruni is like an hour drive away or so, and they give these tours to people. You go take a hike through the mountains and you go see the Mataruni waterfall. So that was, in that middle picture is all of us in front of the waterfall. It was a pretty long hike. I mean, we took super long because a lot of us kept falling. We were mainly me. I didn't put the picture up here, but if you wanted, you can kind of see how muddy my pants were. That's because I had both tour guides holding me by the arms and a walking stick, and I still kept falling. So that was the fun part, but also not so fun because I kept getting covered in mud and it did not work. But on the way back, they serve you lunch and they take you through a coffee experience. Coffee and bananas are the two main like crops in Kilimanjaro. So we got to learn how the coffee is made, and we also got to like make the coffee ourselves. We got to learn how to sort the beans. We got to like crush the beans. We got to help roast them over the fire and do like all the different steps. On the far left picture, the man in the bright pink shirt, his name was Christian. He was the one who was in charge of making the coffee and who like walked us through the whole experience. And I have videos I can show you guys during Third Sunday Lunch if you're interested in watching them. But one of my favorite parts of watching the whole coffee experience is everybody, no matter what the work is, especially when they crush the nuts, it makes a beat. And everyone starts clapping along and singing. And they do this in all their different jobs. They say, if you're singing, it's not really work. It brings them joy, it brings them happiness, so they don't focus on the struggles of how hard their work is. And of course they sing in their native language, Swahili, which is kind of difficult to understand, but to make it more fun for us, and it provided us with a lot of laughs, they would put in like random English words or stuff. Like they would talk about, because they're making coffee, they talked about like, we're the local baristas, like no Starbucks here or something, some weird thing like that, but it was really fun. And then on the far right was is a picture with all of us and our tour guide Amani, who is in the yellow shirt and black coat. He like walked us through the trails and was like pointing out like specific things to us. Like he would say, those houses are for these people who live here, and they told us about the people who used to live there They are the descendants of the Chaga tribe. They are now called the Mataruni people because that is the town that they live in. But they talked about how like the Chaga people were like the main like tribe in that area for like the longest time, and just kind of like told us some local history about it. And it was really kind of cool to like see and learn what all this stuff was. But this was just kind of like the fun day we had on Sunday before the work actually started. So Monday was our reality tour. So we got a local man, his name was Thomas. He took us through sort of like all this expanse of like the nearby town in Moshi, and he was saying like, here's somebody's house, and you'd say, here's somebody's house, but it would be two houses, and we'd be like, why are there two houses? Well, one was newly built. The second one was their old, dilapidated, pretty much hut. But since all these new organizations like MedLife and all these different people have been coming in, they've been provided brand new homes, more like what our homes look like here in America. And he said, do you know why they don't tear down the old houses? And we're like, why? He's like, because they use it as pretty much a storage unit. So they use it for like everything, just to keep all their belongings safe. And they're living in the middle of the jungle, so they have to deal with bugs and not really many wild animals, but just like all these other different things like climate and all that. So they keep these houses just to keep their belongings safe. We also went on the right picture. We went to a school. We went to a couple different schools during our trip, but this was the one we saw during the reality tour. They told us about how you might notice when you see all the different schools that there's usually a church built by it. So back in the day, most of the churches and schools were kind of like together, sort of like how I know most of you know I went to a Lutheran school growing up, and it was kind of like a part of the church. Well, back then in Africa, it used to be the same way. Unfortunately, it has not been that way for a very long time. But they have both private and public schools. And I asked, because I was just very interested, but I asked Nima, our tour guide, or our team leader, I said, Nima, what's like the difference between public and private schools? Like, do the private schools still are still a part of the church, or is there a difference? And she said, the main difference is the language. All the kids learn the same different subjects, but in the public schools, they only speak English in their English class. Everything else is taught in Swahili. And in the private schools, everything is taught in English except for Swahili. And so then when you go on to college, most of those schools only speak English. When you get on to like higher education, they only speak English. And I said, is it difficult for people who are in the public schools to transition, because they're only so used to speaking their native language, and of course they probably don't speak it at home, so how do they learn? She's just like, they have taken an English class, so they have some sort of prior understanding, but they might not speak it super fluently. And I was like, oh. So it's not like they get any extra help trying to learn English. It's just you get taught that 1 year in public school for so many years, and then you're just like, okay, now you're going to speak it full time, even though you probably don't have a decent understanding of proper grammar and sentence structure. But I thought that was just very interesting, because a lot of the schools we saw also, you can't really tell the difference between what was private and what was public. It's just a building, and then you can hear different classes going on all at the same time. Some of these smaller houses we saw were actually like smaller schools for like homeschooled kids, and we were just like, we could just hear like screams, but it was like happy screams and like weird music. And we were like looking over at the building, and they had bars on the window, and we're like, in what world are people happily screaming and singing music in there? Because it looked like a jail cell. But they were like, no, that's just how most of the houses are built, because it helps with like the environment and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. But that was a real eye-opener because we also, right after we went to that school, we passed by a little orphanage. And there weren't a lot of kids out there, but there were some kids and adults playing in the yard, and they were like, most of the kids end up going here, and they pretty much live there most of their lives, even through school, because not a lot of people actually like choose to adopt, or they don't have the possibility to adopt because of like this particular area we went to is like pretty much all jungle, so like it's very small and like not a lot of like access to being able to like grow crops and get and raise money and stuff. So it was very interesting to see how like most of these kids have to stay for so long because of like the lack of resources that people can provide in order to give these kids good homes. Anyways, the next day was Tuesday, which was the start of our clinic days. Now, the way these were set up are we get on the bus and we drive like an hour or so to get to our destination, and then the next day we pass our old destination and we just keep going further into the mountains to reach more people. But there were 6 different stations that we as the students participated in, and we were assigned 2 stations per day, and we worked and worked and worked until it was lunchtime. Then we'd switch our stations and we'd work and work and work until every last person had gone through. So my first day, I was working in the education station, and then I worked in the pharmacy. So for education, that is on the bottom left picture right there. Me and one of the kids from Chicago, Owen, we were both working this station, and it was technically our job to just hand out pamphlets to people as they came in, because the very first station is hand washing or hygiene and toothbrushing. So people would come in, and if you are an adult, you wash your hands, you move on to education. If you're a kid, you wash your hands, we teach you how to brush your teeth, and then usually the kids just go home after that, unless they were with their parents and they were actually here to get checked out. So after adults got their hands washed, they'd come over to us and we would hand them their pamphlets, and then they were supposed to sit on those benches, and a nurse would have been talking to them about the pamphlets with all the different, like, there was stuff about, like, I believe sex education, other like illnesses and things like that. I didn't really get a good look at them. Plus, of course, they were all in Swahili, so I didn't understand them. But we spent like 3 hours just handing out these pamphlets to people. We even ran out at some point because there were so many people coming there. So we had to like literally take a break, go and refold more pamphlets, and then still hand them out. And we still like ran out by the end of our time. But then we went to lunch, and I came back to do pharmacy, which is a picture in that bottom right corner. So pharmacy was pretty self-explanatory, I'm sure. You just get handed the paper by the patient, which has the doctor's notes on it of what prescription they need and how long they're supposed to be taking it. So then we would have to be like, okay, they need this medication, and they need it and they need to take it for 2 days or 2 times a day for this many days. So that means they need this much. So we'd have to unpackage it, cut up the different like tablets, and then put them in a tiny little bag and say, let us check with the nurse to make sure we have this correct. And then the nurse would usually either just take it and never tell us if we did it right or wrong. So we were just like, okay, is this right? Is this right? And then we would never know. And then we were like, if we're trying to help other people to do this, then that was kind of just like a whirlwind. And that took us about like 3.5 hours because we had so many people that day. I believe they said we had about 206 patients come in that first day. So we were there for a while. And unfortunately, we had to reset the whole rotation because, as you can see, right where the education was, we were pretty much in like an open field. Well, it's supposed to be the dry season there while we were there, but climate change had other plans, and climate change recently has been extending the wet season, so it rained pretty much every single day we were there. So of course it started raining like sometime in the afternoon, so we had to move all of those benches inside so that people had a safe place to sit out of the rain. So it got very crowded in there. Our second day was we went to this old, it looked old, but I think it was meant to be like a half-finished church of some sort, but it looked almost like a Grecian temple almost, like something you'd see in Athens, but it was completely made out of like stone, and they had like the roof, I think, was what was technically going to be like another service area, but it was just completely open. It was in the middle of nowhere. There was a giant field in front of it where kids would come from the school to like play during like half the day or something, and we got to play with those kids, and it was really fun. But my two stations for that day was sitting in with one of the doctors, and then I did triage in the afternoon. So top left was me and a couple of the kids from Chicago. We sat with, they called him Dr. One because we had Dr. One and Dr. Two. Dr. One was Dr. Suso. He is an ophthalmologist. So he was, both of our doctors had like specific specialties. Dr. Ringo, I think, was some sort of surgeon or something, but they were only there to like administer general medicine. Like even at that point, it's technically only just like a consultation. We learned on our reality tour day, actually, and also a little bit from talking with Dr. Suso, the healthcare system in Africa, or at least Kilimanjaro specifically, is a whole lot different than it is here in America. If you so much as just want to go to the doctor, you need a referral. You can't even just walk into the hospital and say, I need help. You need to go through all these different steps in order to even so much as see like an actual medical professional to get what kind of help you need, which is why these clinics are so important to people, because they can at least talk with our doctors and say, this is what I've been feeling. We had one lady actually come in with worms, and she didn't even want to tell us. We had to like hear it from the doctors that she was doing so bad. And like all these other different things, like if we were saying we can prescribe you this, but you still need to talk to this doctor, like it could still like, even though our doctors could say you need to go see these persons, you might still have to jump through so many hoops before you even get to see that specific specialist, because you have to like do so much. It's even worse for people like women who are pregnant. Our team leader Nima told us about like a couple people who she had known that they were actually trying to sneak out of the hospital because they knew they couldn't pay, and like the actual hospital staff caught them and still made them come back and like try to pay even though they couldn't afford it. So it's really bad down there in certain areas because you're trying to get the help you need, but you either can't afford it or they won't allow you to until you've received like almost like a written permission to see this kind of specialist. But we learned a lot about him, and actually he learned a lot from us. We had like both of the doctors we talked to, they wanted to like learn what healthcare was like in America, like what we were studying and like all this other stuff, because they knew like we were medical students, but they didn't know like how old we were technically. Like there are so many people in Africa who are like this height, and like they're like we saw kids who were like this height at schools, and they were already in like 8th grade, and we're like, how can a child that tiny actually be someone who's usually about this height by the time they're in 8th grade in America, or maybe even taller? But it was just really interesting to like learn and like actually talk about what our experiences are like here in America. Triage was like my favorite station by far. This was actually technically the only thing more medically kind of like more normal in a medical setting that we were allowed to do. We took their height and weight, we took their blood pressure, we took their temperature, we took their oxygen levels. This was like also like the most intense. Like I told some of my friends, I'm like, man, if I thought pharmacy was intense yesterday, I didn't know what I was expecting when I came to triage, because everybody's like coming in and like sitting in line waiting for you to tell them you can come up. And of course, when we don't speak Swahili, we can't be like, okay, you can come over here. I think that was the day I probably learned the most Swahili, because I was like, I had to learn how to say like, stand here, go sit over there. So like I just kept repeating those words over and over and over again, because I didn't know what else to say besides Simama Hapa, like please stand over here. Like, yeah, so I was like, just that. I'm like, I don't know. They had to put up a chart on the wall for us to learn how to say certain things, so that we could like talk to people like, okay, please go stand over there to get your height and weight. Please come sit here to get your blood pressure. Like, luckily, most of the older people knew like what we meant, because like we would grab the blood pressure cuff. They would be like rolling up their sleeves, and we were like, okay, we got this. We would be putting it on. We'd take their thing. We'd do it. We'd write it down on their paper. We'd give it back to them and go say, go sit down over here, please. And then they would wait to get like, to go see the doctor. There's this picture on the bottom left was one that actually I think Rosalie took of me for like the MedLife promotional stuff, me actually like getting blood pressures and stuff taken. It was like, even though it was only so little, there was still like a lot of stuff that needed to be done. You had to put the blood pressure cuff on, you had to wait until it did it, and then you had to stick the laser to their forehead to read their temperature, and you had to make sure, because sometimes when I would try to put the thing on them for their oxygen levels, they give you your hand like this. And I'm like, no, turn it this way, please. But I can't communicate with them to say, no, flip your hand over. So that did not really help at all. But when it finally started to die down close to the end, I had been getting notifications from my phone and from my Apple Watch that my heart rate had been over like 140 all day, and I was like, I don't think that's true. So I literally had my friends take my blood pressure, and I made them take a picture, because you can't really see it, but baseline for blood pressure is 120 over 80. Mine was 120 over 81, and I'm like, you're telling me that even though I've been feeling like I'm running around with a chicken with my head cut off, I'm doing baseline okay? That I was just like, at least it's not lower than that. But that was probably like one of the better days, because we didn't have a lot of people, but it still took an extensive amount of time. We had like, I think 175 patients that day, but we still got through them pretty quick. And then, of course, it still rained, and it was a mess, because anytime it usually rained so far over the course of that week, there would be like smaller puddles everywhere, and you'd just be like, I guess I'm just gonna step through this water, because I can't step anywhere else without somehow stepping into the water. But that one was still a very interesting day. It was funny also to watch some of our Chicago guys play with all these school children, because there was a school down the hill, and they would come up to us and play in the big field outside of the church, and so like some of our guys, when they were on a break, they went out and played soccer with them, and the kids would go running and screaming everywhere, and we would make fun of each other, being like, oh my gosh, they're afraid of you, and then we would all just stand there and be like, and then the kids would go running and screaming, because all we did was just this. It was really funny to just watch all of those kids run away in terror. But then it would be so funny, because then they would come right back up and just like crowd around you and just stand there and stare at you. And then we would be like, what else are we supposed to do with these kids? And that's where we got the idea, let's show them Snapchat filters. So we put our phones in front of them, and then they were like, and we took a whole bunch of pictures with them. It was quite funny. Our third and final day of clinic, we were, again, kind of in the middle of more jungle area, but we were at this church. It was actually very small, but then there was just like dirt everywhere, so there wasn't like good roads to like maneuver around. But this was our last clinic day, and we only had like 55 patients because it was truly just kind of like in the middle of this spot where like not a lot of people would probably get to, because like the other 2 days we had like people who had walked like so far just to get to this clinic, and like we barely had anybody this day, and we were just like, what are we supposed to do? So I was helping at the hygiene and toothbrushing station, which is the picture down on the left. We just had this big bucket of water and soap, and then all these little kids' toothbrushes and toothpaste, and we were like supposed to give these to the kids and teach them how to brush their teeth, and we had like no kids whatsoever during that whole day. Don't let that other picture fool you of me next to that one kid. She did not come until like way later, close to the end, because there was like a small school right next to that church, and like all these tiny little children, like this tiny, like came up and like were trying to brush their teeth, and they like unpackaged all the toothbrushes, and they were trying to like drink out of the bucket of water that we were having them people wash their hands with, and we were like, no, don't drink it, don't actually drink it. That was like the hardest part of the toothbrushing station, because you have to teach the kids to spit out the water, because you're not supposed to drink that water, but then they would swallow it, so like toothpaste and all, just swallow it, and we're like, no, like that's not what we're trying to tell you to do here. But one of the other Swahili phrases that we learned throughout our reality tour, and then also when we were working with these kids, was how to say Jina lako nani, which is, what is your name? Because we would ask these kids what their names were. Most of the time they wouldn't answer us, and we'd just be like, we just keep asking, and they would just be like, they wouldn't want to talk to us, and we were just like, okay. But we had like, there were only like 15 of them, I think, or maybe less than that. But you couldn't tell who was who, because all of them, like there were 3 kids that had these little frog hats on. We didn't know if they were triplets or if they were just 3 little kids who had the same hat. And we would be like, we were trying to like help this one kid, and then we'd see another kid who had the same similar like clothing or something, and we'd be like, wait, which one were we trying to talk to? Which one was? And because we were kind of like shoved against like rocks and stuff, like behind where the umbrella was. We had to like lean the umbrella up against these rocks so that we could like keep everything dry for when it started raining. But we were just like, wait, did we get everybody? Because all these kids would start coming up and just taking all the toothbrushes, and we were just like, wait, didn't you already get a toothbrush? We couldn't remember, but it was so funny. But I took a picture with this little girl because she was the one child to actually answer me when I said, what is your name? Because everyone was asking her, and we were all like, wait, what did she say? So I asked her, so that's Princess. So she was like the sweetest one ever. I was just like, hi, and she was just like, she just walked up to me and was like, and I asked her name, and she was like the sweetest, and I said, did you brush your teeth? And she was like, I was like, okay, but she didn't have a toothbrush, so I got her one, and then I was just like, you want to take a picture? And I just went like this, and she just went, so I had we had one of the Chicago kids, I don't remember who it was, but we took that picture. We all took pictures with Princess just because she was so sweet. But my second station that day, which unfortunately I did not get a picture of, was talking with Dr. Ringo and sitting with him. It was funny because the rooms where both the doctors were kind of like these side rooms to the church that were kind of like pastoral offices, I would assume. But we had one doctor in here, and there would be like a desk for the doctor to sit at, and there would be this couch, and then this one chair. And the sad part is, you're trying to fit the doctor in there, the patient or patients if there's multiple, and then 3 of us students who are supposed to be sitting there. So it was quite cramped, and like I had to move all the time just to let the patient like come in and sit down. But we had a very interesting conversation with Dr. Ringo. We asked him what some of his favorite movies were, and he like listed all these different series because he said, I don't like singular movies. They have to have a sequel or there's no point. Because like if it's just a one and done story, I guess he just didn't like those. But he said, oh, which one did he say? I think he said Fast and Furious was his favorite. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Then he said his second favorite was Twilight. And I'm like, you're the one person in the world who I know who actually likes that. But I mean, okay. And then he also said Mission Impossible was his third favorite. I'm like, so you have two different action movies as your favorite, but in the middle you have vampires? What's your thinking here? But it was so funny because I was like not talking a whole lot that day, and I just like sat in the corner and just like listened because I was interested in hearing what all these different patients had, because when I sat with Dr. Suso the first day, a lot of the people who we met were having like eye problems. And I was like, I wonder if it differs per place, what kind of things the patients were like experiencing. And I mean, it was a little bit of the same, but not a whole lot. A lot of the people actually in this third location were having like skin reactions and like sore muscles and joints and things like that. And I was like, huh. I would think that the people who had to live in more of the flatter parts of the area would have more problems because they'd have to walk further. Well, because it's such rocky terrain in this area, and people carry a lot of stuff on their backs, like either children or if they're carrying like crops and stuff, it's very like, it's more complicated than for people who lived in the other areas where we had previously visited. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. What was really funny was when the doctor at the end told the two Chicago kids who I was sitting with, he's like, you guys are very competitive. And they were like, we're not competitive. Well, because they had been talking to him and asking him all the questions, and I just sat there in the corner like, I have no questions, I just want to learn what's going on with these patients. And he was like, and then he looked at me and goes, you are very quiet. I like that. I was like, okay. I was like, I just didn't have any questions to ask. I was just like sitting there. I was just along for the ride. But it was actually, it rained a lot there as well. I mean, it dried actually surprisingly fast, which was very interesting because like it's all dirt. You would have thought it would have turned all to mud, and most of it did, but because it was so also sunny at the same time, it would like fall, you would get a little mud puddle, but then it would dry up halfway, and then it would just keep going. And I was like, there's like parts here that are wet, parts here that are dry. Like, I just found that really interesting. The nature out there was very confusing, but also very, very nice. Our final day was our project day, which is kind of like more of like the mission work. We went to a school that MedLife has already been working with when they first started here. You can actually see that there is a MedLife symbol painted on the wall there. We were supposed to be repainting like the outside, and then we were also supposed to be painting this one classroom. We didn't get too far with painting the classroom because first it took us so long to rip down all of the papers and charts and things that they had on the walls, because they had like, we didn't realize this because we thought, oh, they're so tiny, and on the wall there was like algebra formulas and chemistry stuff, and we're like, why are they learning algebra and chemistry? Aren't they like super young? And then they were like, oh no, they're all in 8th grade. And I'm like, still, how are they learning such things when we don't even learn that until we're in high school? But they showed us like a lot of like how the classrooms are set up. They also showed us one of the other buildings that was just a row full of empty classrooms. They showed us, this was where they wanted to not necessarily tear the building down, but they wanted to tear the walls out, because that is one of the newer projects that MedLife is hoping to start sponsoring, because these kids did not have any way to like get food at school. So before we came down, MedLife had just built a kitchen for them. So yay, now they have food. But they're still stuck sitting outside in the rain and the elements when they want to eat lunch. So I went over to that building and I watched as Alejandro and Rosalie and Nima were starting to like film this little promotional video of like, this is where all of our kids are like used to be learning, but they've moved to the new building. So we're hoping to transform this building into like more of a dining hall so the kids can come in, sit and eat lunch and not have to be stuck outside. Well, we started to really feel bad for those kids when it actually started raining that day, because as you can tell from like where we're sitting, the building formed kind of like a U shape, and then there was just this giant courtyard in the middle, kind of. When it started raining, it rained hard. Like we even heard thunder at one point, and it was very windy, very bad, and we were all like hiding inside, like, let's hope this stops soon. It did not, and the whole courtyard and the road all the way back to the bus was like this much water. So we were soaked from the rain. We had our pants and shoes were all soaked, and we were just like, can we go home now? That one was probably my second favorite day because all these kids actually, we didn't realize this, but we assumed, aren't we going to be disturbing the kids because it's like in the middle of the school day? Oh no, it's a national holiday. So they just came to school just to watch us paint. Like we were just like their entertainment or something. And I was just like, it was so funny because you'd have like one group of kids standing around these people, you'd have one group of kids standing around you, and like you're sitting on the floor trying to like paint this building, and then they'd all be hovering above you and you'd just be like, hi. But they were also very helpful. The building itself had like 3 different colors of paint. So we had like the white layer, the blue layer, and then the brown layer at the bottom. So we had to put like tape in between all the layers when we were painting. The kids actually helped us put up the tape because we would be like trying to hold the tape roll, and the kids would just be like, they'd just follow us down the row, and then they would like help us take it off when the paint dried, and we were just like, that was very helpful. And then like right before the rain stopped, the teachers actually called all the kids together, and they started, we thought they were praying at first, but they started singing and like clapping, and we were just like, what in the world are they singing? But I think someone said it was like, if you're happy and you know it, because they only clapped at certain points, and we were just like, we started to like really listen in, and I have a video of it I can show you guys later, but we were just like, it might be, but I don't think it was. We couldn't tell what it was, but it was really cute. Just we all like stopped for a minute and just started filming all these kids because they had like, there was such a multitude of them singing these songs, and it was just so cute to see that even at a young age they instill like such the like importance of music there, because like then when you get older and you start working and you start doing all that stuff and you hear all these people like singing while doing their work, it was like, wow, it's really sweet that in the midst of all of this, like you just get to still experience some sort of happiness in the form of music. I thought that was really, really cool. We went to a store one day after we had exchanged money, and a lot of these things are like handmade. So like these notebooks, like they like take, I don't even remember what they said they're made out of, but they make like the covers of these journals. They have like all different kinds of things. I wasn't sure what this is, but, oh no, that's the money. But they had like these tiny little cup things, and I was like, what is this? No one would tell me what it was, so I was like, I'm still getting it anyway. But I only thought it was this, and when I took it up to the counter, she was like, oh, that's supposed to come with a spoon. I was like, huh? What's this supposed to be for? And she still wouldn't tell me. I think it was meant to be more of like a sugar dish, because I saw like in the mornings when we were served coffee and tea, they had little cups like these with sugar and stuff in it. So I can only assume that was what it was. The other thing that fascinated me is the money. I did not plan on trying to keep any money. In fact, I was trying to get rid of as much of it as possible. I literally just gave my whole stack of cash to one of the girls from Chicago one day because I was like, I'm not planning on buying anything. But I have here a $2,000 bill, a 1,000, and then I have a 500 and 250 coins. Their currency is called Tanzanian shillings because there are other parts of the world who use shillings. Can anyone guess how much this is in USD? 3,500 or no, 3,600 Tanzanian shillings. Nope. How much, Sean? Nope. I hold in my hand the equivalent of 14 cents in USD. 14 cents in 2 bills and 3 coins. $1 is worth 25,000 Tanzanian shillings. So I exchanged a $100 bill. So I came out with a stack of cash about this high, and I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to end up using all that. But all this ended up being like 40,000, so I at least used something. But that was kind of just the overall experience, and it was honestly just a really fun adventure just to be there and experience all this stuff. And sure, the 40 service hours that I collected from this thing were good, but I really enjoyed learning about some of the smaller parts of the culture and all the people we met. Nima and Philip, who are the MedLife leaders there, meeting all the doctors and all the nurses. They were fabulous. But I will say one of my favorite parts besides all of that would be just something that I thought I would share just because it is Sunday, so I need to tie it back to church somehow. This was what our rooms looked like at the resorts. It was a hut with 2 rooms on each side. They have 2 beds. They have a back door, which you can see in this photo, to a little balcony area with an outdoor sink. There's a closet. There is a little shoe rack on the other side of the closet. You can't see it in the photo. And then this other part of the corner of the wall leads to the bathroom with the shower and the toilet. Saturday night, the night we got there, I had eaten dinner and I went back to the room just because I was kind of just wanting to chill and relax. Actually, maybe it was after lunch. It was either after lunch or dinner. I couldn't remember. But I was kind of just getting all my stuff put away, and I just laid down on the bed and I was just like, oh, we're finally here. And then all of a sudden, I felt my mouth start to water a little bit. And that's usually code for me, I'm about to get sick. So I walked into the bathroom, I kneeled down in front of the toilet, and I sat there for about 10, 15 minutes, and then I just started vomiting. And I called out to my roommate, I'm like, Ellie, can you please get me some water and a hair clip, please? And so she comes in, she puts my hair up, she hands me the water, and she's like, you want me to leave you alone? I said, please. So she walks out, I stay there for a couple more minutes, just puking my guts out, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm finally done. I took a sip of water, I went back, I laid on the bed, and I'm like, that was not what I was anticipating. And Ellie's like, you doing okay? I said, I think so. She's like, did you take your malaria medication today? I said, yeah. And she was like, okay, maybe it's just adjusting to the different elevation. And I was like, I guess so. She's like, everyone's gonna go meet at the pavilion just to kind of have a little meet and greet night. And I said, okay. She said, come out if you feel better. Well, I didn't. And the worst part was, I was just feeling very homesick, very nervous, and definitely just did not want to be there. So in normal me fashion, I started to cry. I was crying, being like, I want mom, I want dad, I want grandma, I just want to go home. And I had a blanket that I got with me from the airplane. I covered my whole entire body so that if Ellie walked back in, she didn't see me cry. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. I'm going to feel sick the whole rest of the time. I just shouldn't have come. I knew this was going to happen. And I sat on this bed, which is facing this way. There's another set of windows and curtains on that other side of the bed. And of course, it's dark. We don't have all the lights on in the room. But somehow through my teary eyes, my subconscious mind picked up on this little marking on the wall right below the window. It was some sort of like weird texture thing on the wall. But somehow my mind, in my very sad emotional state, managed to look at that mark on the wall, and it looked like this. If any of you can remember, Scott's been putting some pictures up recently of God's hand going like this. I stopped crying. I laid there, I put the covers over my head once again, and I said, thank you, Lord. I know you're here. You'll help me get through this. Thank you for everything. I picked up the covers and I said, I don't think I'm going to go outside yet, but I'm going to get on some PJs and I'm just going to take an early night. And I did, and I woke up the next morning, felt completely fine, and was ready to keep going at it. That was just a very eye-opening experience, and I bet you I definitely would have looked at that mark later on in the week if I had, and it would have looked nothing like that. It would have not at all. It probably wouldn't even have been there. I don't even know if it was on the wall. But that was just one of the most memorable experiences I definitely had from this week. So I guess that's all I had to say. Sorry, that was definitely kind of long, but a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff just in general that I wanted to be said. So thank you guys.